They made a promise at 12 years old. Fate brought them back to keep it. This is the story of Elias and Clara, two kids who spent one unforgettable summer at Lake Silver. They were inseparable, partners in adventure, exploring the dense woods, skipping stones across the shimmering water, and sharing secrets under a sky full of stars. Elias was the quiet observer, a boy who found worlds in books, while Clara was the whirlwind, painting her life in bold, bright colors. They were different, yet they fit together perfectly. On their last day together, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the lake in hues of orange and purple, they stood on the old wooden dock. They made a pact, a simple, childish promise, sealed with a handshake and two crossed hearts. They promised to meet back at this exact spot in 20 years, no matter what. No emails, no letters, no calls, just a leap of faith. Then, life happened. Clara's family moved across the country, and Elias's stayed, rooted in their small town. The years turned into decades. Clara became a successful architect in a bustling city. Her life was a meticulously designed blueprint of steel and glass, meetings and deadlines. She built skyscrapers that touched the clouds, but somewhere deep inside, she felt a void. The vibrant colors of her childhood had faded 2 shades of gray. She was engaged to a man who was practical and reliable, someone who fit neatly into her structured life. Yet, the memory of that summer, of a boy with kind eyes and a shared dream, would sometimes surface like a ripple on a still pond. The promise felt like a half-forgotten song, its melody just out of reach. Elias, on the other hand, never left Lake Silver. He became a high school history teacher, sharing stories of the past with the new generation. He inherited his family's lakeside cabin, the very one where he and Clara had spent so many hours. He lived a quiet, content life, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of his childhood. But he never forgot the girl who was as bright as the summer sun. Every year, as the anniversary of their promise neared, he'd find himself drawn to the old dock, a quiet hope burning in his heart. The promise wasn't a forgotten memory for him. It was a compass, a fixed point in his ever-turning world. He never married, always feeling like a part of his story was still waiting to be written. 20 years. The day finally arrived. Clara found herself on a plane, flying back to the town she hadn't seen since she was 12. She told her fiancé she needed a solo trip, a journey to reconnect with her roots before their wedding. She didn't even tell him about the promise. How could she explain it? It sounded foolish, a silly childhood pact. She felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. What if he wasn't there? Or worse, what if he was, and they were complete strangers? What was she even doing? Chasing a ghost from her past. As she drove into town, everything was both the same and completely different. The old ice cream shop was still there, but the candy store was now a yoga studio. Her heart pounded as she parked her car and walked the familiar path toward the lake. The scent of pine and damp earth was exactly as she remembered. And there it was, the lake, just as silver and magnificent as ever. And on the dock, a man stood, his back to her, skipping a stone across the water. 1 skip, 2, 3, 4, just like he used to. Elias heard the crunch of leaves behind him and turned. For a moment, they just stared. The years melted away. He saw the same spark in her eyes, and she saw the same gentle soul in his. He wasn't the lanky boy she remembered, but a man with laugh lines around his eyes. She wasn't the wild child with pain-stained fingers, but an elegant woman who still held a universe of light within her. "You came," he said, his voice a little rough. "You waited," she whispered back, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. They talked for hours as the sun set, just like they did 20 years ago. They caught up on 2 decades of life, the triumphs, the heartbreaks, the people they had become. Clara told him about her career, her life in the city, with every word she spoke, she realized how much of her true self she had packed away. Talking to Elias felt like coming home. Elias shared his simple, fulfilling life. He spoke of his students, his love for history, and his quiet contentment. But as he looked at Clara, he knew that contentment wasn't the same as true happiness. He had been waiting, he realized, not just for her, but for his life to truly begin. That night, they didn't just reconnect with each other. They reconnected with the parts of themselves they thought they had lost. Clara saw the artist she used to be, the girl who wasn't afraid to be messy and spontaneous. Elias remembered the dreamer, the boy who believed in epic stories and happily ever. The next day, Clara was scheduled to fly back to her life, her job, her future. But as she stood at the edge of Lake Silver, she knew she couldn't. She couldn't go back to a life that was perfectly designed, but emotionally empty. She was an architect, yes, but she had forgotten to design a life where her own heart had room to breathe. She made the hardest phone call of her life. It was painful and difficult, but it was honest. She ended her engagement. She wasn't just choosing Elias, she was choosing herself, the person she was always meant to be. Clara decided to stay, not just for a week or a month. She stayed for good. She bought the old, abandoned boathouse on the other side of the lake and, using her skills, transformed it into a stunning art studio and home. The bold colors returned to her life, not just on her canvases, but in her heart. Elias and Clara, now in their 30s, got a second chance at a first love. They explored the woods again, not as kids, but as two people who had weathered the storms of life and found their way back to each other. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. It was about the choices we make, the promises we keep, and the courage to follow your heart, even if it leads you back to where you started. Their promise, made on a whim by two 12-year-olds, turned out to be the most important blueprint of their lives. It was a promise that guided them through 20 years of separation, a beacon that ultimately led them back to the shimmering waters of Lake Silver, back to their true selves, and back to each other. They learned that some promises aren't meant to be broken, and some loves are written in the stars, just waiting for us to be brave enough to read them. Thanks so much for watching our story today. If you enjoyed this journey to Lake Silver, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next tale. See you next time.